Thank you so much, and thank you to the organisers of this fantastic conference for inviting me to speak today. Just one small point, the new South Asia Gallery is due to open in autumn 2022. So I just wanted to say that.
Oh, I do apologise. What did I say?
I think you said 2020.
Oh, I do apologise.
Maybe I didn't hear, but anyway, it doesn't matter. Right, so thank you very much. Today I'm going to be talking about Jayaben Desai and her image in the sari during the Grunwick strike. So, oops. So in this paper, I'm going to explore the power of the sari and particularly how it was worn by Jayaben Desai, who became the leader and spokeswoman of the Grunwick strike, a strike which campaigned for the rights of its immigrant workers, a mainly female South Asian workforce, to join a union. Over a 2-year period from 1976 to 1978, the strike was widely reported in the national press and on television, unsettling Parliament and ultimately the British government. To set this in context, I firstly need to explain a little bit about the background of Jayaben Desai, her roots in Gujarat and her life in Tanzania, and the political and social scene she stepped into when arriving in the UK. By the way, this is Jayaben Desai here on the bottom left of your screen. So Jayaben Desai, here as a young girl, was born in 1933 in Dharmaj, a village in Gujarat in India. This state had and still has a long and sophisticated tradition of textile production going back thousands of years, not only in spinning and handloom weaving of cotton and silk cloth for the national and international markets, but also in block printing, embroidery and finished tailored garments. Gujarat was also, of course, the home of Gandhi, the civil rights leader who finally led India to independence from British colonial rule. And as we know, cloth played a highly political role in this movement. And Gandhi championed hand-spun and hand-woven cotton cloth known as khadi, boycotting foreign imported made-up goods. As a teenager, Jayaben Desai was aware of the independence movement and remembered the imprisonment of Nehru and Gandhi by the British authorities. Jayaben also remembers listening to his lectures on philosophy broadcast over the Indian radio. And so from an early stage, she would have been aware of the political message of cloth and the importance of the dressed body. In 1957, when she was, I've just lost my notes. When she was 24, she married Suryakant Desai, who owned a business in Tanzania. It's fair to say that the Desai family enjoyed the class privileges afforded to Asians settling in Africa at that time, occupying a middle ground between the white ruling classes and the black, largely unskilled labor class. However, as the countries in East Africa gained independence from white colonial rule, there emerged a process of Africanization, contributing to a growing tension between the Asians and Africans. Tanganyika and Zanzibar got their independence to become Tanzania, and it, like many other East African countries, adopted policies to promote the African population. And so East African Asians who still held a British passport fled to the UK, which reached its zenith in 1972 when with the compulsory expulsion by Idi Amin, ordering all Asians in Uganda holding a British passport to leave within 90 days, resulting in approximately 30,000 Ugandan Asians arriving in the UK, many of whom were Gujaratis and Punjabis. In 1967, Jayaben and her children arrived in London, so just before the climax of this wave of immigration. They had arrived in Britain in a tide of growing racism and xenophobia. They had to live in very poor accommodation, sharing rooms amongst families, desperately taking up jobs where they could, often at much lower rates of pay and status than they had previously enjoyed, effectively starting their lives all over again. So Jayaben started work in the mail order department at the Grunwick Film Processing Laboratory in Willesden, which is the outskirts of North London, in 1974. At this time, the mail order department was a vital component. Sorry, that's the slide I want to be on. At this point, the mail order department was a vital component. There was a rise in people sending their films off to be processed. And this was really the heart of the business. So the higher the volume of turnover, the greater the profits. And Grunwick at that time recruited heavily from the South Asian immigrant community because they afforded cheap labour and high profits. Interestingly, also from a dress point of view, the South Asian women at this time were not expected to wear a uniform, and so were allowed to wear their own dress, such as the sari, but in some cases, some women chose to wear Western clothes. Working conditions were very difficult. Many of them had to ask permission for even the simple things like going to the toilet. And when the line manager compared Jayaben Desai and her colleagues to chattering monkeys, she replied, "What you are running here is not a factory, it is a zoo. In a zoo, there are many types of animals. Some are monkeys that dance on your fingertips, others are lions who can bite your head off. We are the lions, Mr. Manager." And with those words, she led the workforce out on strike on the 20th of August, 1976, and joined the trade union Apex. The events that followed contributed immeasurably to increasing the level of respect shown to newly arrived immigrant workers, many of them women, especially by their colleagues in the existing workforce, and brought together an otherwise racially divided trades union. George Ward, who was one of the owners of the factory, was himself an Anglo-Indian and played on the idea of Asian female shame, how being seen in such a public demonstration was not only demeaning to herself, but to her husband and entire family. However, Amrit Wilson, who knew Jayaben Desai, recalled that she stated that Ward would come up to her and say, "Mrs. Desai, you can't win an sari," to which she replied, "Mrs. Gandhi wears a sari and she is ruling a vast country." So turning now to the sari specifically, the Gujarati community, like many different communities from South Asia, have their own distinctive culture, not only in their food, but also in their way of dress. And one of the most distinctive forms of dress was the way in which they draped the sari. The sari, being a long, rectangular, highly versatile length of fabric, is adopted by many women in South Asian societies. It's multifaceted, multi-transitional, and one size fits all. It's been celebrated for thousands of years for its purity as a whole length of unstitched cloth, and typically it's between 45 to 52 inches wide and ranges between 4 to 9 yards in length. The dimensions are governed by the way it is draped. Typically in the 60s and 70s, saris were woven in a 52-inch width of 6 yards. There are numerous ways in which a sari can be draped, each signifying its origin in the wearer's socio-cultural identity, including the community or region it hails from. The Gujarati style of draping a sari involves bringing the pallu to the front. In the slide that I'm showing you, this is the Nivi style, which is the most common style of wearing. But and this is just shows you the process of wearing the Nivi style. But if we look at Jayaben Desai, we can see that the pallu, which is normally the highly decorated end piece of the sari, has been brought forwards to the front of the body. And so if we think about theories such as those of Merleau-Ponty and the experience of dress as being a subjective act of attending to one's body, making the body an object of consciousness, and as an act of attention with the body, I propose, on the available evidence, that Jayaben Desai consciously draped her sari in the Gujarati style, positioning herself as a Gujarati wife, proud of her original homeland and its long historic association with the political power of cloth. As the scholars Anita and Pearson have stated, Jayaben and other strikers visited the homes of the women workers to address any concerns they might have had about taking part in the strike and to persuade their families to allow them to join. And Jayaben recalled that many parents of young women were worried about this aspect of shame and the idea that they risked gossip. However, when we look at the images of Jayaben Desai, we can see that she was fearless. She was always seen on the front line, and it was widely reported in the press, even feminist press such as Spare Rib. And even at home, she was always dressed in the Gujarati style of draping the sari, which you can just make out under her cardigan here. What's also important is the effect she had on the other young women. I mentioned that she essentially went into people's homes to persuade them to join the strike. And here you can see a group of young women who essentially toured the country as part of the committee, drumming up support for the Grunwick workers. They're all dressed in the Gujarati style of draping the sari, and they are photographed here, very proud, very aware that they are being photographed. And there's a sense of uniformity in the way that they are presenting this defiant and very proud picture to the world. And I propose that this way of wearing the sari and the sari itself actually had a double message. On the one hand, it allowed her to negotiate and communicate very readily and easily and accessibly within her own South Asian community. But on the other hand, the impression of the sari, a traditional dress, was perceived by the white management as a signifier of the Asian woman being suppressed and docile and subservient, how wrong they were. So in other words, the sari actually acted as a shield and a sword, or to put it another way, a dual image as a perceived sheep and an actual lion. And so to conclude, while there has been much scholarship on workers' rights of South Asian immigrants, highlighting issues of trade unions, gender and labour, there has been little attention on the dress of Jayaben Desai. In all the images I have seen in archives, the remarkable sight of Jayaben Desai dressed in a sari, standing in front of hundreds of supporters and fearless in the face of the wall of towering policemen is an enduring and empowering image, not least because at this time, immigrants coming to Britain, like me and my family, were faced with the rise of the National Front and escalating confrontational, often violent racism. With constant taunts from people telling us to go back to our own country. Yet Mrs. Desai never once compromised her sense of dress by adopting the Western fashions, and even more remarkably, her visible presence striding forth in a sari with a loudspeaker brought the mainly white male trade unionists together, joining her in supporting her campaign for union recognition. Jayaben told the final meeting of the strikers that they could be proud. We have shown that workers like us, new to these shores, will never accept being treated without dignity or respect. Not long before she died in 2010, Jayaben Desai said, "I am proud of what I did. They wanted to break us down, but we did not break." Finally, I would like to thank all those Asian women who fearlessly stood on the picket lines to campaign for people like me and my family, the right to join the union and for better treatment in the workplace. While there are still inequalities in the workplace that exist at all levels of employment, I am personally extremely grateful for the sacrifices and hardships they endured, and their work will always continue to inspire me. Thank you.